Well, I'm James Handley. Mr. Paul and I have been friends for a long time. In fact, I've known him all my life. He always called me Jimbo, and I'd get a phone call every once in a while, and he'd say, "Jimbo, we need to make a road trip. I need to go to Austin. You mind driving me?" And we'd make our plans and hop in the car, and here we'd go. And we always had to be there about 2 or 3 hours early because he didn't like to be late for anything. And one of my most memorable ones, he had to testify for the legislature or a committee of the legislature, and it was on something to do with the Nature Conservancy taxes and whatnot. And we went down. Well, we got there early, and but we couldn't get to the meeting because he kept bumping into people in the halls, and they'd want to talk. And so, "Come in my office a minute. Let's visit a few minutes." And finally, we got to the hearing area, and of course, as you showed up, you did your talk, and so we sat down, and finally they called Mr. Matthews. And before, the people had been testifying, and the gentlemen that we were testifying before were drinking Cokes and eating popcorn and really not paying that much attention. And I thought, that's not very polite of them. Here these people have driven from all over the state of Texas, and they're not really paying that much attention. Well, Mr. Paul went up to the podium and cleared his throat and said, "Gentlemen, I know you're real busy, but I have something I need to talk to you about." And they all hushed, put down their Cokes and popcorn, and they listened. And he told them what he thought they ought to do. And I was thinking, there's not too many people around that can demand that kind of attention. And he got respect from everybody. He was one of a kind. We'll miss him dearly.
Good morning. I'm James F. Taggart, 2417 O'Neill Street, Greenville, Texas. My longtime friend, Paul Matthews, passed away recently. My first recollection of Paul was when I was quite young, and he came out to our farm, which was west of Floyd, to chop cotton. My mama was very fond of him, and she referred to him as one of the finest young men she knew, and he always referred to her as Miss Pearlie. And years later, he always asked me, "How was Miss Pearlie?" Because he never forgot her kindness to him when he was such a young man. In January of 1939, I was employed by the Greenville National Exchange Bank, and I was in the bookkeeping department, and that's where Paul Matthews was located at that time in the bank. Sometime later, he was transferred to the tellers department, and I took over the books that he was posting and in charge of getting the statements out of one ledger. And that job I held for many years until Paul was made head of the tellers department, and he asked for me to be transferred to the tellers department to be his assistant. And I was his assistant until he was made a loan officer, and I don't remember exactly what year that was. But it seems that I have followed in his footsteps in the banking business all through the years. However, in 1965, I left the then First Greenville National Bank and was gone from Greenville for some 11 years. I came back as president of First Greenville because Jack Finney was the head of a committee to hire someone to be the head of the bank. Of course, Mr. Finney had known me for years, and I remained at the bank as president until I retired in January of 1986, I believe it was. But during the time I was president of the bank, Paul continued to be on the board of directors and was very helpful in every way. He referred to me always as Jimmy T, and that's what he had called me throughout all the years of our acquaintance and working together. I also remember how much he loved CB. Now, CB was Carrie Beth Dial, whom he married in the 20s. She was the love of his life. And of course, they had a son, Dowell, and I remember Dowell as just a 7 or 8 or 9-year-old youngster. I don't remember how old he was. But Carrie Beth remained always as his partner in life. He was very much in love with her to the day she passed away. And I'm sure right now those two are up in heaven making up for lost time. It's been a pleasure always to be a friend of Paul Matthews.
We're standing in the foyer of the old post office, a project that Paul Matthews was really behind and in favor of. I just gave a presentation to the local ladies club, which sort of explains the uniform I have on. My memories of Paul go not back as far as most Greenville citizens, but so I've only known Paul for about 10 years. But I have some very fond memories. One of those is on his 99th birthday, on January 3rd, 2003, Paul and I went quail hunting down on his property down at Rocky Point. Paul took me up to Floyd, and we got the birds, and we went down, and several of us shot quail. Paul at 99 actually fired a shotgun. He didn't hit anything that day, but he was an amazing guy. I have lots of other memories. Gail, my wife, and Paul really hit it off, and he always called her his girlfriend. And whenever I would see him at Rotary or wherever we were, he'd say, "Where's my girlfriend?" Paul also was an outstanding friend to my nephew. 5 or 6 years ago, I brought an 11-year-old nephew to Rotary Club on Wednesday, and he sat next to Paul. And Kyle returned every year for about 4 or 5 years. Every year he sat next to Paul, and all year long, Paul would ask me how my nephew Kyle was doing. He was just a good friend to everybody he ever got to know. The other thing that is so important to me about Paul Matthews is his loyalty to the Rotary Club. And as a Rotarian, one of the most proudest things I've been able to do as I've traveled the world, and I've had Rotary meetings on cruise ships, for instance, is tell people that we have, at that time, a 99 and later on a 100-year-old member who had been to every week's Rotary Club for 58 years or more. And it was a source of pride, basically to our club, to me personally, and to our district, 5810, which is the northeast part of Texas. Paul was a wonderful, wonderful friend. We're just going to miss him terribly.
Hi, I'm Bob Duell, family physician here in Greenville and state senator from Senate District 2. And I'm very happy to be able to share my thoughts and memories of Paul Matthews. Paul was a friend, a gentleman. The first thing that I noticed when we moved to Greenville in the mid-'80s was that this man had been involved in virtually every community activity there was to be involved with, and that everyone had a great story to tell about him and the work that he had done for the community. Something that I've noticed